Welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast. I am Jeff Hilimire, and with my friend Alex Gonzalez, we explore topics that help you be your best self. And we also get to chat with some great guests. So join us now on the Jeff and Alex podcast.
Hello, Jeff Hilimire.
How's it going?
All right, and welcome everyone to the Jeff and Alex podcast. And Jeff and I are here, and as we get this series going, one of the things we thought we would do is make sure that you'll get to know us. And Jeff has had a chance to talk to me and has learned some stuff about me I don't think he knew about, and which is kind of crazy as we've known each other. We figured out we didn't even realize we knew each other for 10 years. And so I'm actually excited about this because, you know, when you get into just kind of your stuff, you sometimes don't get a chance to really get to know somebody or ask the question. So Jeff, I'm looking forward to this.
Well, me too. Yeah, I learned a lot of stuff talking to you. So I don't know if I have such good stories, but we'll see.
As long as you start crying by the time we're done, I'm okay.
Okay, good.
That's my goal.
All right. No, I am feeling a little dramatic this morning, so let's see.
Oh, boy. Well, let's start out and kind of get really fundamental. And I thought I saw somewhere that you were born in Chicago. Is that a truth or lie?
Yeah, that's the truth.
So what's your childhood? So give me your journey and how you got to. I know you went UNC Charlotte, but kind of where was your childhood at, and how'd you get up to your adult life?
Yeah, I was born in Chicago, just outside of Chicago, but we moved down to Atlanta when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. So I really consider myself a true Atlantan. We moved to Stone Mountain, and you know, my sister and I and my mom, and then after a couple of years, my mom remarried, and then we had 2 other sisters. So I have 2 sisters that are 10 and 12 years younger than me, and then one that's 3 years younger than me. So it was the 4 of us growing up in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Yeah.
Wow. And so you grew up in Stone Mountain. Did you pretty much stay in the Stone Mountain area the entire time until you became an adult?
That's
or
right.
Went up to college?
Yeah. I think our senior year we moved out to Gwinnett, but I kept going to Stone Mountain High School. And that's when I started dating my now wife. So we've been together since we were 16 years old. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 6. I'm like, wow, I've heard of high school sweethearts, but never kindergarten sweethearts. But
right.
Wow. Okay. We can spend the next hour on that. So you met her at 16.
Yeah.
And did you date pretty continuously since through college and everything?
Yeah. So I'm 44 now, and we've been dating since maybe it was just after, right around when we both turned 17. So more than half my life we've been together. Yeah, nonstop through college. Then got married after college, and we just celebrated our 20th year anniversary.
That's great. And stop bragging about your age,
Yeah.
It's a 50-year-old on the call, but we're still Gen Xers.
That is one thing I skipped, though. I was born on leap day. So,
so you're really not 44. You're probably 62, right?
No, opposite. I'm 11.
That's right. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you already counted your leap in it. That's why it's a fake 44. Right. No. You just do really good. And
That's right.
Oh, wow. So every 4 years, I'll make sure to get you something. Okay.
Yeah. Perfect.
So it's a lecture I missed this year. So I'll get you in about 3.5 years. So, all right. So you went, where'd you go to college then?
Yeah, I went to UNC Charlotte. Actually so I was playing tennis and wanted to play tennis in college. And I actually, for 2 years, went to a very small school called Limestone College. It's like in South Carolina. It's about 3 hours north of Atlanta, or east-ish. And I went there to get better at tennis. I mean, I was consumed with being a better player and playing Division I. And so then I transferred for my junior year and finished out at UNC Charlotte.
Gotcha. Now, here's the part that actually I don't even know the answers to, and I should, but I don't. You went to college, UNC Charlotte. You call yourself, a lifelong entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Was that truly since day one, or what was your first step outside of college in terms of getting to the working world?
Yeah, so I studied computer science in college, and quickly fell in love with building websites with my college roommate.
Mm.
It was, I guess, 96, 97. And the internet, the web was new. And so my roommate could do graphic design pretty well. And so I would build websites from the code perspective. He'd put the creative on it. And so then in our senior year, we decided to start a company. So since senior year of college in the dorm room, I've been essentially running my own companies. I've never had a job.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah. Well, that I could vouch for that, but
Yeah,
it's in a good
yeah.
way. So,
Right.
all right. So let's talk about that. So that's kind of a classic entrepreneurial story out of college.
I
And
just didn't drop out. If I had dropped out, it would be the classic
true. Yeah.
entrepreneurial story.
If you went to Harvard or Stanford and dropped out, then
Yeah.
we would have had it. And
But I
of
got
course,
the
you would have been a
degree.
billionaire, right? You would have been a billionaire in that
Right.
case. But
Yep.
so computer science too. Actually, that I find that in fact, one of the things I was going to ask you about is on the spectrum of being highly creative or highly analytic, where do you put yourself? And I kind of had a guess in my head, but the computer science degree is throwing me a little bit. Where would you put you in that spectrum?
Oh, that's such a good question. If those are the two options, I
And
guess
it
I'd
could
have.
be a range too, so there could be a scale there. It's not absolute.
Yeah, so I'm not very creative. Like if we were to do some improv, I'd probably be terrible at it. I'm just not great at that. What I always was able to do was to work really hard and decide I was going to do something and focus on that and do that thing. And so, but I'm also not I don't like sitting and looking at data the way that some people do. So I don't know. I go by gut a little bit, maybe more passion in what I do, vision, leading, so since I was younger, I was always finding myself in leadership positions. And so I definitely would not call myself very creative.
Although the funny thing is, a little birdie that knows you well calls you a creative spirit. And your ability to float around and get into different projects and keep driving and having different ideas. So part of me, I think, is also that definition of what is creative, because immediately you went to the art side of it. I think creative is a much broader spectrum. It's about problem solving, inspiring new ideas and all that. So you're probably more on the creative spectrum than you.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. Yeah, I guess that's probably true.
Because I know you're not because you're not, and actually, this is actually interesting from an entrepreneur perspective. You are not kind of your classic coder. I mean, you had a computer science degree, but do you ever sit down and write lines of code for your company?
Not anymore, but I did the first couple years.
Okay.
But it only took about 2 years before I realized that this wasn't my passion, and there are people who are really good at it, and I was just average. So quickly, that's probably the reason that I, as we were a 2 or 3 or 4 person company in the early years, SpunLogic was the company that I became. It's probably one of the reasons I became the CEO, is because the others were better at actually doing the things we were doing. They were more talented than
Jeff
I
doesn't
was.
know what he's doing. Let's just give him CEO and
Right.
collect payments.
Promote me up until I'm not messing things up. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, so SpunLogic was your first company then, and so tell us about that journey. So you talked about how you found it, and you had a partner. So kind of how did SpunLogic evolve, and did you end up doing the same thing you intended to do?
Yeah. So it was actually originally called NBN Designs, nothing but net, because Charlotte at the time was a really good basketball school.
Right.
We'd get to we'd get into the tournament and win a game or two. So that was the best. Raj Chowdhury was my college roommate. Best thing we could come up with was NBN Designs. So for 2 or 3 years, we were NBN Designs. We went from the dorm room to my parents' basement in Snellville, Georgia. Worked out of there for about a year.
Tech mecca of the South.
It's exactly right. We're 1 year into the business. This is like June, July, August of 99. We had started the business in November 98. We were in the basement and just scratching and clawing to get any projects. The only paying client we had to that point was my aunt in Chicago, who let us build her website for a couple $100. And so Raj was actually traveling around the world. His parents gave him a around the world trip ticket to for graduation.
Wow.
So he was graduating. I like to kid him that they only did that because they thought they'd never have to cash that check. But so he was in New Zealand, and I had recruited my best friend Danny Davis to drop out of graduate school and join our company.
Wow.
Which was a nothing. I mean, so he moved into my parents' basement and lived in there where we did our work.
Crazy. Wow.
So it was the three of us, but Raj was traveling. So Raj sends me a note and says, "Hey, this guy's going to call you. I've been talking to him about building a website for queenstown.com." And so, all right, I don't know that the phone, I think I had to like move stuff away to figure out where the phone even was. Nobody was calling us. And so I picked up the phone, NBN Designs, this is Jeff. And the guy says, is this NBN Designs corporate US headquarters? It's like, yep, you got us. Right. So after an hour talking on the phone with the guy, he says, okay, I want to fly you out to New Zealand and spend a week with me, you and Raj. We're going to come up with the plan to build this website and then send you back and we'll get going. So I was like, sure. So I was coaching tennis at the time at a country club during the days, building websites at night and weekends. So I flew out to New Zealand. You know, I must have been 22. Spent a week there. When I flew back, we had a signed contract to build Queenstown.com for $65,000.
Wow.
The biggest thing we'd ever done was, again, I think it was $250 for my.
And now you told me your age. That was a long time ago. So that was a lot of money.
Oh my gosh. We thought we were rich. So, yeah. So then what we did was we got back, we had a signed contract. We moved out of the basement into the back of a fitness center that was interesting, but we had our own office. Right. Raj canceled the rest of his trip, moved to Atlanta. I quit coaching tennis. Danny had been waiting tables at nights, coding during the day, so he quit the job. So we were all in on this business. We're working on the website for a couple of months. It's January of 2000. And the guy sends us a note after being silent for a week or two and says, hey, I've got some bad news. My company went bankrupt and we got to cancel the project. Now, this is before we ever knew to get any money up front. So we never got a dime from him. Yeah. So at the time, that felt obviously devastating. And that led to years and years of, I can't tell you how many credit cards I put, personal credit cards, to just fund anything, to payroll, whatever we were doing.
This is when like your parents were like bankrolling you or anything. I mean, you really had to, you know.
They had no idea. Like, so I was really not sharing much. I think pride was there where I was like, well, I'm telling people I have my own company. I have to make this work.
Sure.
But what I look back on is that moment forced us to be all in on the business. And so I've always kept that with me, that to build something, to start a company, to do something extraordinary, you have to put everything you have into it if you want to be successful. You can't assume, I mean, it's so hard to do anyway. For you to assume that you can do it with half your energy or a portion of your energy, it's not going to happen. So from that point, for the next several years, we just were like, all right, we've got to figure out how to make this work. And I ended up with over I think a 3 or 4 year period, over $100,000 in credit card debt, juggling cards. So as you can imagine, a 22-year-old, I got like my first credit card, and I think I had like a $250 limit. Yeah. And then I would fill that up, and then I would get a second card that had a 0% balance transfer, and I transfer the $250 onto that card. I call the first company and say, hey, I'm such a good customer of yours. I paid it off. Can I get this doubled? So then they'd say, all right, you got a $500 limit. And I kept juggling cards. And I think I had like 15 cards, $100,000 in debt. And my wife, my parents, nobody ever knew.
So your wife, okay. You just.
Because in my mind, I considered them business cards. Like but they were in my name. Like there was so it was all attached to me. But yeah,
and you're joint credit with your wife.
Not at the time. So when I started, actually all this was just in my name. But yes,
gotcha.
we're attached. Yeah. And then, a year after that or so, we got married, but we could only survive. We could only afford an apartment for a year. And then we moved in with my mom for a year and lived in her like attic apartment thing. So yeah, the first 3 or 4 years were real tough trying to figure out how to build a company.
So how was because it's interesting hearing all these journeys and, let's talk about this kind of development of grit, that you get, which I'm sure you talked so much about that, but also, having someone you love kind of being part of that journey. When you think about your, I guess, fiance or girlfriend at the time, soon to be wife, or even when you got married,
Mm-hmm.
how was that partnership in terms of pursuing something that some would perceive highly risky? Because entrepreneurship is risky to some extent. It's not for everybody. How did that go? Or was it more of, I trust you, Jeff, just do what you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our first year of marriage, she was a counselor and made, let's call it $30,000 that year. And I am sure I lost more than $30,000
Right.
that first year. So that's why we had to move in with my mom. You know what? She never did anything but supported me and believed in me from the beginning. And there was no reason to, I'd never done anything like that. I didn't even have a business degree. Um, but no, from the beginning, she supported me and encouraged me and listened. But I also didn't share a ton because it was just so nutty and crazy. But yeah, no, it's a great question. I guess because we're soulmates, Alex.
That'll be a future episode. We'll have. Tell me the
Single
truth.
tier.
Exactly. I'm trying to break it, Jeff.
So here's what I'll just say. Fast forward to when I started Dragon Army. I was like, all right, so now I'm skipping a couple things, but I've built and sold multiple companies. I don't know, late 30s, and I told her, I said, okay, I'm ready to start my next company. And I think that was a harder conversation than when I was 22 doing it, because now we've got a life, we've got kids, we got family, and yet I actually have done it before. But we had way more conversations this time than we ever did in the past, even though I've had success.
Sometimes when you know what you have access to, it gives you a little bit more like, well, do I really want to take this risk? So let's kind of focus a little bit on that time. You had this element of high risk. You put a lot of money, personal debt, a lot of grit. So how did you recover from this, canceled contract? That sounds like it actually gave you kind of the grit, like I'm all in, we're going to make this work, which is, by the way, I think it's an X factor for so many leaders, period, is what is that moment? So kind of talk a little bit about that journey to where eventually SpunLogic, you end up selling or spinning it off.
Yeah. So, we just did everything we could, the classic term hustle. We would, almost, if anyone needed us to do anything, any client, we would do it. So we were mostly building websites, but we would go to other agencies and we'd say, hey, let's say they were a great creative shop. We'd say, we're a fantastic development shop. We'd love to do the development side of your projects. And then immediately go to another agency that was a tech shop and say, you guys are great at tech. We're so good at creative. We'd like to do the creative portion of yours. So we were like anything and everything, we would take it and do it.
Right.
We couple years later, we realized we needed to change the name, partly because Raj is from England, and when he said NBN Designs, nobody could understand the N or the M, or it was constant. So we're like, we got to do this. So here's what we did. So we came up with 4 possible names. SpunLogic was one, and you won't believe, actually, I think it was 5. You won't believe that we didn't realize SpunLogic was the best. So we had SpunLogic, we had Cracker Snap, which we actually liked the best. Brainstick, and Code Word 9, and I think there was another one. So we had these names, and we all wore. We went to a networking event, and we all wore a name tag with a different name to see reactions. And SpunLogic by far won the day, so that's why we changed the name.
There's one or two that I imagine may have gotten you kicked out.
Yeah,
the
probably
networking
so.
event.
Probably so. So yeah, but I'm telling you, we thought Cracker Snap was going to be the winner. We were all in that thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to kind of maybe reverse course on my creative comment, but we'll keep
Right.
moving
See,
on. But
there you go. So then we're 5 years into SpunLogic.
yeah,
Looking back, the thing that I think helped us the most was we decided to have a focus for the company, and we landed on the idea of user experience being something that we thought we could go all in on. So whether we were building a website, working on an email campaign, whatever it was, we would go all in on the user who was going to be experiencing that thing. Today, companies have entire user experience departments, but back then
yeah.
it was relatively new.
Oh yeah,
So, and what that did, it wasn't that user experience was so unique. It was that it gave my company the ability to speak the same language and to be passionate about the same thing, to have a focus. I honestly think it didn't matter what it was. Looking back, it just was that we had something. So then when we hired people, we were talking about user experience. When we went to pitches, it was all about user experience. And so you just get better if you
sure.
have something that you can rally around. So I look back at that moment. From that point, we doubled for 5 straight years. Our revenue went something like annual revenue went, let's call it $200,000 one year to 450,000 to 1.1 million to 2.2 million to 4.5 million to 9 million. So we just doubled, got to 9 million by year 10. And we had always wanted to sell the company. That was always our plan. And so once we got to that size, we started the process of putting our company out there for potential buyers, and got a lot of interest. So this was almost all through 2007. We were having meetings, talking to companies about acquiring us. And then we ended up selling in March of 2008, right before the economic crash.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been better timing, because people were trying to deploy money because they saw sort of maybe a recession coming. Everyone else in the Southeast, we were the largest independent agency in the Southeast at the time.
Wow.
Everyone else had sold. So that's when we ended up really getting excited about this new concept called Enguage. And we sold to them late March of 2008.
Wow. And now I noticed that, some of your adoring fans know this already, but you've also recently started a video or podcast series called Spun Mafia.
That's
so
right.
Tell me about the relationship with your founders, because obviously this is a series that talked with your fellow co-founders. What made you want to bring the gang back together there, and what's special about the relationship?
Yeah. So there was Danny Davis, Raj Chowdhury, and then Raghu Kakarala. He was the fourth partner, joined us like year 3 or 4. So there were 4 of us, and we had arguments. It was crazy, but we remained friends. We all stayed at Engage. Danny left after a couple years, but Raghu, Raj, and I stayed through the end of it. And then we all were doing our own things. So for the last 7 years, we've been starting companies, helping join and build companies. And so we had dinner actually right before COVID hit. So I think it was like early March, the 4 of us, and we hadn't had dinner in years together.
Wow.
And it was it was like a 5-hour.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
7 years of 7 years of catching up,
And so Raj was the one who said that there's some people in our industry, in the digital agency industry, refer to the Spun Mafia. And if so, the PayPal Mafia was, is known in Silicon Valley. They built PayPal, and then they all went out and did things like, Elon Musk was a part of it, right? So they've all started other amazing companies. And so between the 4 of us, we've started multiple companies in Atlanta. So people, and a lot of our leaders are running companies that were at SpunLogic now and stuff. So anyways, there's this, maybe a couple people say it, but there's this idea of Spun Mafia. So I was like, you know what, let's get the band back together and have some conversations. So yeah, we've been doing a couple of Zooms and talking about the old days, and there's stories there that none of our employees knew. And so it's fun to sort of go back and go, well, there's no harm in sharing these now. It's like been 15 years since we had that company. So yeah, it's been fun.
And it's also good, I think, to show the entrepreneurial network growth here, you know, in the region and so forth, to see that, because that's an important piece of it, right? All of you are starting different companies, you're inspiring people, getting that kind of entrepreneur's DNA, you know, spread throughout the region as well too. So, all right, so you're in Enguage. So what was your role at Enguage? How, you know, it sounded like it lasted a few years, and definitely want to start getting to what your next step was after that.
Yeah. So Enguage was, you know, it was my first time. So we came together with two other agencies. We were the digital side. There was an advertising agency that was larger than us in Columbus, Ohio. They were like 125 people. We were 75. And then there was a shop about our size in Austin, Texas. It was direct marketing. And so the idea was put these companies together. They're going to have, you know, three core areas of expertise. So I was chief digital officer, which really meant I oversaw digital for the whole company. And it was the first time that I'd ever had someone telling me to do. You know, there was a CEO. I was on the board, but there was a board.
Sure.
And I struggled that first year a lot. For a while, I thought it was potentially because I was broken. I can't work with, you know, someone else telling me what to do. Maybe it's something like that. Even though I went into it excited about having somebody, a leader that I could learn from, because I hadn't been able to do that for 10 years because I was having to be the leader to make the big decisions or you know, get my partners on board. But I realized it's actually that I just very, very, very much disliked the CEO of the company. And so I had
it wasn't about the structure. It was really about, that's important.
It was about an individual. And so at the end of that first year, which by the way, we didn't have to stay. Immediately day one, we got our cash and equity, and it wasn't an earnout. But the idea was they gave us a nice amount of equity because they wanted us to stay and be a part of it. That's how Enguage, which I appreciated. So at the end of that first year, I said, all right, I can't just run a department, you know, run digital and quite honestly work with this CEO. So I went to the board and said, I believe that social media and emerging technologies is really where we need to focus. Let me have one employee. I'll start a new team. I'll call it the Digital Innovation Group, DIG. And it's almost like I would have my own little startup within Enguage. So they said yes. So I gave, you know, all the people that were reporting to me, maybe it was 100 at that point. Raj took them, and I took my one employee, and we had like a back room in the office that was used for storage. And I cleaned a little bit of that out, and we started up back there. And so for a year, we built that innovation group, which got to about 20 people. We were working with Chick-fil-A, Coca-Cola. We were early in social because of that. And then that showed me that I really was excited about this company. You know, we'll zoom through where I essentially gave the board an ultimatum. It was me or it was the CEO. And I was happy to leave if they didn't see it my way, but they did. So they made some changes, and that allowed me to become president of the entire company. And so for the next 3 years, we really pointed towards social and became known as a social agency. We had 250 people. And then, you know, we sold after a little after 5 years of doing Enguage. So it was crazy. It allowed me to see all sorts of different parts of businesses and private equity and, you know, the great things that they bring to companies. So it was a fantastic experience.
So, so this was the exit then, you know, you went from, I mean, you had, I guess, an exit with SpunLogic or becoming part of the organization. So what was that? You had this exit, and then what was going through the mind of Jeff Hilimire then? Because we've just established that you're just naturally curious too. You're always trying to, you know, look around the corners.
Creatively curious, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. You mean when we sold Enguage?
Yeah.
So I had told the board, let's say 9 months before we sold, actually more, I told the private equity guys, I said, look, I'm not going forward we were going to sell. That's how private equity works. And I said, I'm not going forward with wherever we sell to.
Right.
I knew that would be difficult because the CEO, I really like the new CEO. He became a really good friend, and he's great. But I was sort of known as the digital guy, and we were a mostly digital company. And so I knew whoever was going to acquire us would want both of us to stay. And because that's how agencies work. If you acquire an agency and then the leader leaves, there's all sorts of panic and worry that you're going to lose clients and whatever. So I told them, I said, look, I know we're going to have to sell. I'm not going forward. I'm starting my next thing. And so it's probably the main reason we ended up selling to Publicis, which merged us with Moxie here in Atlanta, because Moxie had leadership. And I think the last thing they would want is me running around that place, creatively disrupting things.
Exactly.
They had a great business. They were doing their thing. So when we sold, I was the only employee at Enguage that didn't go forward and become a Moxie employee. And actually, a lot of people don't realize that. They're always like, hey, when you were at Moxie, did you know so-and-so? And I was like, well, I never was at Moxie. So immediately, actually, I started Dragon Army, actually technically 2 weeks before we signed the paperwork to sell Enguage. So I was ready and started.
You didn't spend 3 months just traveling. You went straight into Dragon Army then.
I was ready to be an entrepreneur again. I was dying to be an entrepreneur again. Yeah.
So was that the drive? Was it about becoming an entrepreneur and using that platform to kind of explore, or was it like this whole concept of whatever Dragon Army was focused to do at the time? So was it about the idea or the opportunity that kind of got you to be excited about Dragon Army?
It was it was definitely not the idea. It was that I finally would start something again. And Ryan Tuttle, who became my best friend, he worked for me at SpunLogic, then at Enguage, and really became my right hand from an operations perspective. So he and I had always talked about starting a company once I was done with Enguage. And he came up with the name Dragon Army. He had that in his pocket. So it was more about the energy, the excitement of starting my own thing, and building something special, and not have to make compromises. And I was just ready to get back. And I really wanted to try again because I felt like I had gone through almost an MBA over the 5 years of Enguage to learn how to actually build a company from others who had done it. So I was just raring to go.
Are there things that experience, particularly at scale, with Enguage, that you immediately brought into building Dragon Army? Like, did it shift how you think as an entrepreneur or as a leader?
I think it did more from a financial planning perspective,
okay.
And a little more rigor around that. As I described SpunLogic, we were running, from crisis to crisis, disaster to disaster, putting out that fire, starting another fire. And then we started doubling for years, which required us to figure out how to scale and grow and promote people. And so we never really had time to sit and think about how to plan out the business and map out a budget and so forth. So I think that's the main thing I learned from Enguage that I took to Dragon Army. Otherwise, I mostly learned things not to do. Not to put up with toxic people, culture type things. I think we were way too conservative, which we had to be because private equity has a plan, and, incremental growth is fine to get to a sale. That's fine. But so there were mostly things I think I learned not to do. Again, not because they're bad, but at a small scale, you really don't want to do those things.
So I definitely want to get into some of the variety of things that you're also involved with. But so when you described Dragon Army, and I got to know you while it was a very young Dragon Army, I guess, at the time. But when you describe to people, what is Dragon Army? What do you say?
Today, we're a purpose-driven digital engagement agency.
And when did that purpose-driven become part of what you are?
Yeah. So in 2012, I went through a program called Leadership Atlanta. So right before we sold Enguage, Leadership Atlanta, I went there because Ken Bernhardt, who gets mentioned on most of these podcasts, he was my number one mentor and advisor and supporter. And so I said to him, as I was getting closer to Enguage selling, I said, I feel like maybe I want to go get an MBA or something. Like, I feel like there's some experience I need that will help me be a better leader when I start my next company. And he said, you've got to go for Leadership Atlanta. And I didn't know why. I just thought, all right. Yeah. So I went through it. I luckily got in, and very early into the process, you go through a race awareness weekend, right? And it's a 2-day program. And it was the first time that I really started to see the massive amount of privilege that I have as a human being. That I certainly worked hard and earned some advantages, but mostly who I am helped me every step along the way. So I started first seeing how race plays into that. And again, this was almost 10 years ago, and seeing that, my African-American classmates of that Leadership Atlanta class, the struggles they were having on a daily basis that I never even had to worry about. One of them, very successful architect, far more successful than I had been, telling me that at least once a month he's pulled over in his car because he drives a nice Mercedes and never gets a ticket, but he just gets pulled over and harassed and asked, what's he doing in this neighborhood or something. I've never in my life had that. And that's just one tiny example of something that he's dealing with all the time. Maybe it made him late for dinner that night. Maybe his wife was upset. Like, it's just like everything compounds. And so then I started realizing I'm also a man, and I have advantages I'm taken more seriously, and I shouldn't be, but I am. I'm Christian, I'm straight. Like, so as all that started to happen, I started to land on a personal purpose. And I decided that because I have so many advantages, I need to be on this earth to have an outsized positive impact on the world. Outsized because the thing I've been able to learn how to do is build things, grow things, bring people along. And then it has to be positive because I'm getting so many advantages for nothing. And so I'll be honest, for the first 2 or 3 years of Dragon Army, I struggled with having a purpose for the company, because what we do is we build things for others. And it was easy for me to see that, Nike could say their purpose is to make the world healthier. I don't know, that's definitely not it, but let's say they said that they make athletic, that's perfect. Like, that would work. They could credibly say that. As an agency, we build stuff for Nike, we build stuff for Coca-Cola, we build stuff for Home Depot. I could never find a purpose that I thought would be authentic, because I was like, well, but tomorrow we may work for a company that doesn't do that. And how do we, and then I spent time with a couple of experts on purpose, and I studied Simon Sinek, and I realized that actually I could create a purpose for the company that was authentic, but that was less about the things we do and more about the why we exist. And so we've landed on, and for the last, say, 4 years, really focused on our purpose of inspiring happiness. And so everything led to this point where I feel like Dragon Army was the company I was meant to make, because we are living into our purpose. We have values that we actually bring to life. At SpunLogic, we certainly had a culture, but we never articulated values. We certainly never had a purpose. Like, I feel like now I'm seeing a new way to run a company where everybody can feel like they're a part of it, that they're contributing to it, and that it's doing good in the world. We talk about business as a force for good. Like, I'm a huge believer that businesses should be a force for good in this world. So Dragon Army is a different company entirely than anything I've ever done, and it's very much purpose-led.
Yeah, and by the way, a little bit of a commercial for those of you watching or listening, as Jeff and I will have an episode where we kind of go deep or a little deeper into purpose and vision, and kind of really explore it. I'm sure we will continue to explore that over the weeks, months, and years to come. So, and I will say that as I got to know you with Dragon Army, it's definitely a classic example of, Jeff Hilimire, the person, really having the fingerprint on Dragon Army, the company. And how do you get the people that are part of your organization to be part of that purpose? because, you know, it's not going to, you know, no one's going to ever be exactly Jeff Hilimire, yet, you know, you have this fingerprint of you on that. You know, what's that alignment that you do to get that? And you haven't, by the way, having been around, you know, Dragon Army team, it's an amazing team. So I know you're doing it, but what's that secret to do that?
The part of the secret, I think, is that it takes constant work. It takes a long time. So one of the things that we've done for years is we have a purpose, vision, tenets, and values, which is a structure that I've pulled from different sources that I think works for my companies. And I won't, but I could recite them word for word. Everyone on my leadership team can recite them word for word. And we start every company meeting. We start every town hall. We start every leadership team meeting reciting those. And so that's a simple thing, but it reinforces to people how important it is. It can feel a little culty. So we've had new people join, and they're seeing people just word for word recite this thing, and it can be like everybody's here is drinking the Kool-Aid. But there's things like that help. You know, we a couple of years ago changed our annual, we had an annual planning day, right? Where it's like November and you're planning for the next year. We've completely changed that to be an annual Inspire Happiness Day. And it's all about our purpose and how we can, how we did this year against our purpose of inspiring happiness, how we can do more forward over the next year. Anytime I talk about profit or revenue goals with the company, I remind everybody that there's a reason that we want to grow. There's a reason that we want to be a healthy, profitable company, because it allows us to do more to inspire happiness.
Right.
The larger we are, the more volunteer hours we can do, the more we can work with nonprofits and build their websites for free, the more we can donate. Like there's strength there that allows us to make a bigger impact. So and by the way, we also run something called the Great Game, which is complete open book transparency on numbers. So everybody in our company sees all of our financials and have live access to that, so that they know where we're putting our money. And so I'm just trying to create a different type of business and a culture where everybody really believes it, so that it doesn't, to your point, it's not just me that's the one saying it. And anytime I hear someone say in the company, wait, but our, part of our value is to, celebrate diversity. Are we doing that here? When they reference the thing that we're saying all the time, it reinforces to me that they're hearing it and absorbing it and then appreciating it. And so it's not going to be for everybody. We're starting now to take more stances on voter registration and things of that nature, because we think we can help make an impact there. There's going to be people who don't believe in voter registration. So they're not going to come to Dragon Army, and I'm fine with that. So the more I can make it everybody, and it's not, which is I think what's happening, the better. But certainly in the beginning, I was the only one reciting that, call it 5 years ago. And I'm sure I looked like a loon up in front of everyone doing it, but I just committed to it and said, you've got to do the hard work and keep repeating and keep reinforcing, and eventually everyone will have it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, it's interesting because I feel like you're ahead of the curve of an evolution that you're seeing, even one of the biggest companies in the world having to be, purposeful. And then of course, the question is, how authentic is it, and so forth. So I think you're well ahead of the curve on that. I want to, you're also starting to communicate a lot of that through your books and a few things, which we'll get to in a minute, but kind of a quick pivot on that. So you have, a beautiful, wonderful family. So first of all, how do you achieve or even define work-life balance?
Oh, really good question. So I was bad at it
and
early.
do you even call it work-life balance? Because some people say there is no such thing as a balance in some cases.
I don't shy away from using that term. One of the things I try to work with my leadership team on is them finding balance, because some of them work way too hard and too many hours, and I don't want that for them. I want them to be able to be with their family. So early on, I was terrible about it. And in terms of like always thinking about the business, I think at one point on a Sunday, my wife was like, what are you thinking about? And I said, I can't wait to go to work tomorrow morning, on a Monday morning. And she was like, well, that makes me feel great that we're sitting here hanging out.
That's
That's
actually,
like,
that's an
and that was a learning lesson for me. I'm like, well,
excellent observation.
I also love being here with you. I just, there's so much excitement. So when you
Right.
love your job, it is hard to turn it off and not think about it. Having a purpose. So I really believe that when the success of Dragon Army will help me achieve more of my purpose of having an outsized positive impact on the world. So if we're more successful, it's going to help me live into that more. So it does allow me to feel fine ebbing and flowing and working for an hour here or there. But I've definitely gotten better as I have 5 children. You can see some of their artwork if you're watching, of making sure that I'm understanding there's time for them, and they're certainly the most important part of my life. And but it's hard to turn off when you have that entrepreneurial thing going on.
And I guess it's finding that blend of how do you get your family involved in it to a certain point as well too.
Yeah.
And you're pretty transparent. I notice, with you, you're also pretty transparent even with your family and social media and all that. You share, authentically share, your experiences for them. And I feel like you weaved in beautifully your family with what you do and your purpose. So how do you describe yourself then today? I mean, do you describe yourself when some say, hey, Jeff, and you introduce yourself, do you right off the bat, is that your first statement is I lead a company called Dragon Army, but you have so many other things. You have a couple books, you have so much that you do, you speak, you have your family, you have purpose-driven elements, you have, in fact, we haven't even had a chance to talk about it. You have your elements of social impact, a nonprofit with Ripples of Hope. So when someone says, Jeff, what do you do? What do you say?
I usually just say I'm the CEO of Dragon Army.
Yeah.
And leave it at that, and we can go from there. If I were just to say what I am to you, I would probably say entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's the closest thing to what I feel I am. But yeah, I don't want to be like I'm an author. I do all. Yeah. I start with CEO of Dragon Army. It's the main platform. It's sort of the most important thing that I focus on, because I know that Dragon Army unlocks everything else that I want to do. And it's right now, at least, the best chance for me to do the most good and to impact the most lives, because we have team members, and if they're happier and they are exposed to more nonprofit opportunities, they're going to do more good. So I feel like that's the main thing right now.
And talk a little bit about that nonprofit side, because it is, I think you're seeing that a lot of leaders in terms of how do they use their success to help others. And so talk a little bit, they start with 40 and 48, but now you have something called Ripples of Hope. But how do you lean into helping other people that are doing good?
Yeah. So again, as I think about having an outsized positive impact, it's one thing if you just we'll talk about 48 and 48. It'd be one thing for me to build a website for a nonprofit. It's an entirely other thing for me to get 200 people to volunteer their time to build 48 nonprofit websites. That's how I can have that outsized positive impact. So in 2015, I had this idea of what if we put on a hackathon and brought the marketing and technology community of Atlanta together to build potentially 48 websites for nonprofits in 48 hours. And grabbed a good friend, Adam Walker, and whose company was doing WordPress websites. And I said, do you think this is possible? He said, yes. So then together we started 48 and 48. Put on our first event in October. And again, I thought it would just be a one-time event. We're just trying it out. And we literally had well over 100 people show up and spend a Friday afternoon to a Sunday afternoon building nonprofit websites. And it was that late on Sunday where multiple people were coming up exhausted, and saying, hey, can I go ahead and put my name on the list for next year? I don't want to miss out. And I was just struck by that, because I'm like, these people have given so much of their time. They're not with their families. They're not playing Frisbee. They're not, and not only that, they liked it so much that they don't want to miss out next year. Not only, hey, tell me when, they were like, I want to. And so that really was like, wow. So this thing really is for the volunteers, because number one, they're probably volunteering more time in that weekend than they did the entire year normally, but they're also more likely to do more good. They're more likely to volunteer in the future. They're probably rubbing off on their friends and family. And so that's when I was like, all right, this is something that if I put my energy into, I can build into an organization that's having a big impact. So now 5 years later, we've done over 20 events. We've done a couple in London. The Atlanta event gets over 500 people. We have Delta and State Farm and IBM and amazing companies that are a part of it. And now I chair the board. There's somebody running it, and it's sort of this evolving thing, but I was able to start it and get it going. And now it's continuing to make a big impact, and I can help steer the ship a little bit, but mainly it's an organization that's rolling. So that was the first nonprofit I started. And then last year I started my second one, which is called Ripples of Hope, which you mentioned that really is, as I lean more into privilege, I'm realizing that nonprofits don't get nearly the attention that the tech startups get. They don't get the funding or the mentors or the advice. And you have these people that have given their lives to make a difference because they're all about passion, and yet they're not classically trained business leaders. And so Ripples of Hope is a hybrid mentorship, curriculum, cohort, peer group, program for 2 years for nonprofit leaders to be able to really scale their business. So I'm really into, I'd much rather the nonprofit in Atlanta that's trying to end homelessness scale and have a big exit, which for them would mean ending homelessness. I'd rather that happen than the next tech startup have an IPO, right? And so that's the idea of Ripples of Hopes. And we'll start small in Atlanta, take our time with it, but I obviously have bigger plans if this thing can work.
That's great. So one thing I don't want to, want to make sure you also talk about as well is you are an accomplished author. And so kind of give a plug. I'm gonna act like we're in a radio show here. So give a plug of your 2 books, Jeff Hilimire.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's funny that you mention it. I actually have the first copy of the second book I wrote, The Crisis Turnaround.
If you're more sophisticated, it'd be a beautiful graphic coming over here and all that. But yeah,
I can probably work that out.
There we go. Maybe I should. Yeah, as I say that, it's going to get edited in.
We'll do that. Yeah. So I always wanted to write a book, and so a couple of years ago, I wrote my first book called The 5-Day Turnaround. The idea is for non-entrepreneur leaders to lead like entrepreneurs. And the real reason I wrote that is because most of my clients are executive level leaders at big corporations, and they've been climbing the corporate ladder and they're just not having fun anymore. And they're like, what am I doing? Right. It's almost like a new midlife crisis. And so as I thought about it, I thought I've never a day in my life not loved my job. There's been hard days, but as an entrepreneur, you love what you're doing. And I spent time thinking about, could that apply to non-entrepreneurs?
Right.
And, I use you as an example. You're an entrepreneur now, but you hadn't always been, but I always felt like you had that spirit. And I saw that you loved what you were doing. And if you didn't, you tried to change it, which is an entrepreneurial trait. So that's what the first book is. It's focused on that. And it's also I partly written so that I could give it to a nonprofit leader and say, look, here's things you could read about that'll help you think more entrepreneurially and hopefully grow your business.
Right.
And then the crisis turnaround I wrote during this pandemic, it just occurred to me that there aren't a lot of books written about how to lead a company, a team, a business during a massive crisis. So maybe it's a niche book that only works this year and never works again, but there's leadership principles in there that I think are relevant regardless of whether you're not in a crisis. And I just was like, I got to put my energy into something. And so I pumped that book out. So now it's called the Leadership Turnaround series. I'm working on the third book. So so it's fun. It's fun to write.
Yeah, and I know he's a compliment and give Jeff a hard time because he's an accomplished author of multiple books now. As I'm trying to write my first book, so I'm trying to see if I could beat him this summer with my first book while he writes his third.
I can't wait.
But I don't know. But he's able to lock himself. That's where your focus comes in. You're able to lock in and get it done. So no, it's great. Yeah. So definitely check it out. So look, before we wrap up here, a few things. Give me some quick responses to this.
Okay.
So Do you prefer going to the theater or streaming or watching streaming services? Movie theater or
Streaming.
streaming? Streaming. Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, for
Oh, we'll
sure.
come back
Yeah.
to that at some point.
Yes.
Favorite food?
um, Bluebell homemade vanilla ice cream.
I love that you went ahead and classified that into your food category.
It's very important. They have a what do they have, like a vanilla bean or something? It's not the same. You need the homemade vanilla ice cream.
Do you have a favorite food that does not require 40 grams of sugar?
I no, probably not. Then my tie is Lou Malnati's deep dish sausage pizza, which is only in Chicago. Yeah.
There you go. Favorite Atlanta restaurant?
Oh, it's
And
gonna
you can
be
pick two if you want. There might be one for family, one for non-family.
yeah, it's gonna be the Castellucci Hospitality Group. They're an amazing company. I know their owners. So they have Cooks and Soldiers, which I love.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Iberian
Oh
Pig,
yeah,
which is great.
yeah.
They've got some amazing restaurants. So if I get a chance, I try to go to one of theirs.
And what's your favorite kind of getaway or place to visit or vacation, however you want to classify it?
Honestly, I'm there right now. So we have a place in Big Canoe. It's like an hour and a half north of Atlanta. It's like a little mountain community. So we have a house there. And since quarantine, we've pretty much been up here. This is like a closet that I can touch both sides, basically, that I've made into my office. But I honestly prefer it over almost any place or trip. I mean, we've been on great trips. We loved Scotland a couple years ago, but I love getting here because it's just calm and relaxed. I'm an introvert at heart. You may not know that about me, but I like just being relaxed and just having some coffee out on the back porch.
And writing an incredibly generous amount of books while you blogs. So as we wrap up, you actually blog quite a bit, and you've also been doing some other podcasting, and you use the title "Begin the Begin."
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, so Begin the Begin is one of my two favorite REM songs. REM's my favorite band.
Yep.
And Begin the Begin, to me, like, it's this call to action. It's this call to get started. When I talk to entrepreneurship classes or groups or people that want to start companies, for instance, I always hear, well, I'll start my company, but I need more time. I need more research. I need this, I need that. And it's like, you gotta start. The world is full of people who have dreams that they never went after them. And so Begin the Begin is like almost a mental reminder for me, like, you got to get started. You got to put something out there. So I just love the spirit of that. It's actually, I think, not what the song is about, but it's Begin the Begin just sounds good to me.
And by the way, I think that's one of the strongest entrepreneurial traits. I've heard people who've gotten advice from you, and it's like you'll meet somebody and say, I met with Jeff and he gave me some advice of this, that, or the other. And it's funny, this is before you and I even really talked about what Begin to Begin means, but effectively comes back to that. Just start getting something out there, which I think is I think that to me is such even more of an critical entrepreneurial trait than many of the others that, kind of get the press. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the core one. Cause if you don't do that, you're never going to be an entrepreneur. You're never going to start something. Yeah.
And I think, and by the way, just another plug, there's Jeff and I spend a lot of time talking about entrepreneurial versus corporate, and where there's, when there's some commonalities on that you could find on YouTube or your podcast platform. But that is such a critical part. And I think it would apply not just to being an entrepreneur in terms of starting a company, but even in corporate life. If you don't begin the begin, it's irrelevant, which is so much of what you write about and talk about as well too. Yeah. So finally, Jeff Hilimire, before we wrap up, what inspires you? What gets you up every day? Because I know you change your answer for Monday mornings, but just in general, what gets you going in every aspect of your life?
Wow. That's a really good question. I love seeing, I'll give the first thing that came to mind. I love seeing my children grow into young people that have empathy. To me, as I try to have an outsized positive impact on the world, I do think no matter how many businesses I start and things I get involved in, that if I can put 5 humans out into the world that really believe they're there to make the world a better place, whatever that ends up meaning for them, um, that is the biggest impact that I could possibly have. And so when I see them talk about a problem, when I've heard some of them on conversations with their friends talk about things that show me that they're thinking about other people's feelings. We talk about a lot of the issues going on in the world with our children. So I think it's my children inspire me because they make me want to be a better example for them. They make me want to be a better human because I'm hopeful that rubs off on them so that they go into the world and make a difference.
Well, that is a very good thing that keeps you inspired, and I think you inspire quite a bit of people out there as well too. And I know, and I say this with all sincerity for those who don't know Jeff. You get to know Jeff because you get to know people around Jeff who starts saying amazing things about Jeff. So definitely inspiring many people around him. And and Jeff, it's great to be partnering with you on this project here with the Jeff and Alex podcast. And so hopefully people got to know you a little better, and we'll continue to get to know you and us throughout the series, and as we interact with other people and start talking to each other about just things that keep us both inspired, and hopefully keep you inspired too as you listen and watch as well. So Jeff, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That was fun.
That was fun. And make sure you also follow Jeff on social media and follow us in general to hear so much more. And we will see you here next time.